Namaskar. Gandhi in India. Gandhi returned to India in January 1915. His efforts in South Africa were well known not only among the educated but also among the masses. He decided to tour the country the next 1 year and see for himself the condition of the masses. He also decided not to take any position on any political matter for at least 1 year. As for the political currents prevalent at that time in India, he was convinced about the limitations of moderate politics and was also not in favor of home rule agitation, which was becoming popular at that time. He thought that it was not the best time to agitate for home rule when Britain was in the middle of a war. He was convinced that the only technique capable of meeting the nationalist aims was a non-violent satyagraha. He also said that he would join no political organization unless it too accepted the creed of non-violent satyagraha. During 1917 and 1918, Gandhi was involved in three struggles in Champaran, Ahmedabad, and Khera before he launched the Rowlatt Act Satyagraha. Champaran Satyagraha 1970. First, civil disobedience. Gandhi was requested by Rajkumar Shukla, a local man, to look into the problems of farmers in the context of indigo planters of Champaran in Bihar. The European planters had been forcing the peasants to grow indigo on 3/20 part of the total land, called Tinkatia system. When towards the end of the 19th century German synthetic dyes replaced indigo, the European planters demanded high rents and illegal dues from the peasants in order to maximize their profits before the peasants could shift to other crops. Besides, the peasants were forced to sell the produce at prices fixed by the Europeans. When Gandhi joined, now by Rajendra Prasad, Mazhar ul Haq, Mahadio Desai, Nihar Rikap Parekh, and J.V. Kripalani reached Champaran to probe into the matter. The authorities ordered him to leave the area at once. Gandhi defied the order and prepared to face the punishment. This passive resistance or civil disobedience of an unjust order was a novel method at that time. Finally, the authorities retreated and permitted Gandhi to make an inquiry. Now, the government appointed a committee to look into the matter and nominated Gandhi as a member. Gandhi was able to convince the authorities that the Tinkatia system should be abolished and that the peasants should be compensated for the illegal dues extracted from them. As a compromise with the planters, he agreed that only 25% of the money taken should be compensated. Within a decade, the planters left the area. Gandhi had won the first battle of civil disobedience in India. Other popular leaders associated with Champaran Satyagraha were Brijkishore Prasad, Anugrah Narayan Sinha, Ram Navami Prasad, and Shambhu Sharan Verma. Ahmedabad mill strike in 1918. First hunger strike in March 1918. Gandhi intervened in a dispute between cotton mill owners of Ahmedabad and the workers over the issue of discontinuation of the plague bonus. The mill owners wanted to withdraw the bonus. The workers were demanding a rise of 50% in their wages so that they could manage in the times of wartime inflation, which doubled the prices of food, grains, clothes and other necessities caused by Britain's involvement in World War I. The mill owners were ready to give only a 20% wage hike. The workers went on a strike. The relations between the workers and the mill owners worsened, with the striking workers being arbitrarily dismissed and the mill owners deciding to bring in waivers from Bombay. The workers of the mill turned to Anusuya Sarabhai for help in fighting for injustice. Anusuya Sarabhai was a social worker who was also the sister of Ambalal Sarabhai, one of the mill owners and the president of the Ahmedabad Mill Owners Association, founded in 1891 to develop the textile industry in Ahmedabad. For help in fighting for justice, Ansuya Behan went to Gandhi, who was respected by the mill owners and workers, and asked him to intervene and help resolve the impasse between the workers and the employers. Though Gandhi was a friend of Ambalal, he took up the workers' cause. Anusuya Anusuya too supported the workers and was one of the chief lieutenants of Gandhiji. It was Anusuya who went on later to form the Ahmedabad Textile Labour Association in 1920. Gandhi asked the workers to go on a strike and demanded a 35% increase in wages instead of 50%. Gandhi advised the workers to remain nonviolent while on strike. When negotiations with mill owners did not progress, he himself undertook a fast until death. His first to strengthen the workers' resolve, but the fast also had the effect of putting pressure on the mill owners, who finally agreed to submit the issue to a tribunal. The strike was withdrawn. In the end, the tribunal awarded the workers a 35% wage hike. Khera Satyagraha 1918, first non-cooperation. Because of the drought in 1918, the crops Because of drought in 1918, the crops failed in Khera district of Gujarat according to the revenue code. If the yield was less than one-fourth the normal produce, the farmers were entitled to remission. The Gujarat Sabha, consisting of the peasants, submitted petitions to the highest governing authorities of the province requesting that the revenue assessment for the year 1919 be suspended. The government, however, remained at the Andaman and said that the property of the farmers would be seized if the taxes were not paid. Gandhi asked the farmers not to pay the taxes. Gandhi, however, was mainly the spiritual head of the struggle. It was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and a group of other devoted Gandhians, namely Niharika Parikh, Mohan Lal Pandya, and Ravi Shankar Vyas, who went around the villages, organized the villagers, and told them what to do and gave the necessary political leadership. Patel, along with his colleagues, organized the tax revolt which the different ethnic and caste communities of Khera supported. The revolt was remarkable in that discipline and unity were maintained even when on on a non-payment of taxes the government seized the farmers' personal property, land and livelihood. A vast majority of Khera's farmers did not desert Sardar Patel. Gujaratis in other parts who sympathized with the cause of the revolt helped by sheltering the relatives and the property of the protesting peasants. In those Indians who sought to buy the confiscated lands were socially ostracized. Ultimately, the government sought to bring about an agreement with the farmers. It agreed to suspend the tax for the year in question and for the next reduce the increase in rate and return all the confiscated property. The struggle at Khera brought a new awakening among the peasantry. They became aware that they would not be free of injustice and exploitation until the country achieved complete independence. Gains from Champaran, Ahmedabad, and Kerala. When Gandhi demonstrated to the people the efficacy of his technique of satyagraha too. He found his feet among the masses and came to have a surer understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the masses. He acquired respect and commitment of many, especially the youth. Roll Act, Satyagraha, Jallianwala Bagh massacre. While on the other hand, the government dangled the carrot of constitutional reforms, thought of an unsatisfactory order. On the other hand, it decided to arm itself with extraordinary powers to suppress any discordant voice against the reforms. The Rowlatt Act, ju- just 6 months before the Montfort reforms were to be put into effect, two bills were introduced in the Imperial Legislative Council. One of them was dropped, but the other, an extension to the Defence of India Regulations Act 1915, was passed in March 1919. It was what was officially called the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act, but popularly known as the Rowlatt Act. It was based on the recommendations made in the previous year to the Imperial Legislative Council by the Rowlatt Commission, headed by the British Judge Sir Sidney Rowlatt, to investigate the seditious conspiracy of the Indian people. The committee had recommended that the activists should be deported or imprisoned without trial for 2 years, and that even possessions of seditious newspapers would be adequate evidence of guilt. All the elected Indian members of the Imperial Legislature, all the elected all the elected Indian members of the all the elected Indian members of the Imperial Legislative Council voted against the bill, but they were in a minority and easily overruled by the official nominees. All the elected Indian members, who included Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Madan Mohan Malviya, and Mazhar-ul-Haq, resigned in protest. The act allowed political activists to be tried without juries or even imprisoned without trial. It allowed arrest of Indians without warrant or on the mere suspicion of treason. Such suspects could be tried in secrecy without recourse to legal help. A special cell consisting of 3 High Court judges was to try such suspects, and there was no court of appeal above that panel. This panel could even accept evidence not acceptable under the Indian Evidences Act, the law of habeas corpus. The basis of civil liberty was to be suspended. The object of the government was to replace the repressive provisions of the Wartime Defence of India Act 1915 by a permanent law. So the wartime restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly were reimposed in India. There was strict control over the press, and the government was armed with a variety of powers to deal with anything the authorities could choose to consider as terrorism or revolutionary tactics. Satyagraha against the Rowlatt Act. First mass strike. Just when the Indians expected a huge advance towards self-rule as a reward for their contribution to the war, they were given the Montfort reforms with its very limited scope and the shockingly repressive Rowlatt Act. Not surprisingly, the Indians felt betrayed, more so Gandhi, who had been at the forefront in offering cooperation in the British war effort and who had even offered to encourage recruitment of Indians into the British Indian forces. He called the Rowlatt Act the Black Act and argued that not everyone should get punishment in response to the isolated political crimes. Gandhi called for a mass protest at all India level, but soon, having seen the constitutional protest met with the ruthless repression, Gandhi organized a Satyagraha Sabha and roped in younger members of the Home Rule League and the Pan-Islamists. The forms of protest finally chosen included observation of a nationwide hartal, that is strike accompanied by fasting and prayer, and civil disobedience against specific laws and courting arrest and imprisonment. There was a radical change in the situation by now. One, the masses had found a direction. Now they could act instead of just giving verbal expression to their grievances. From now onwards, peasants, artisans, and the urban poor were to play an increasingly important part in the struggle. The orientation of the national movement turned to the masses permanently. Gandhi said that the salvation would come when masses were awakened and became active in politics. Satyagraha was to be launched on April 6, 1919, but before it could be launched, there were large-scale violent anti-British demonstrations in Calcutta, Bombay, Delhi, Ahmedabad, etc. Especially in Punjab, the situation became very explosive due to the wartime repression, forcible recruitments, and the ravages of disease that the army had to be called in April 1990 saw the biggest and the most violent anti-British upsurge since 1857. The Lieutenant Governor of Punjab, Sir Michael O'Dwyer, who is said to have used aircraft strafing against the violent protesters. Jallianwala Bagh massacre, April 13, 1919. Amritsar was the worst affected by violence. In the beginning, there was no evidence by the protesters. Indians shut down their shops and normal trade, and the empty streets showed the Indians' displeasure at the British betrayal. On April 9, two nationalist leaders, Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal, were arrested by the British officials without any provocation except that they had addressed protest meetings and taken to some unknown destination. This caused resentment among the Indian protesters, who came out in thousands on April 10 to show their solidarity with their leaders. Soon the protest turned violent because the police resorted to firing, in which some of the protesters were killed. Tension ran high. In the riot that followed, five five Englishmen are reported to have been killed, and Marcella Sherwood, an English woman missionary going on a bicycle, was beaten up. Troops were sent Troops were sent immediately to quell the disturbances. Brigadier General Reginald Dyer was the senior British officer with the responsibility to impose martial law and restore order. By then, the city had returned to calm, and the protesters that were being held were peaceful. Dyer, however, issued a proclamation on April 13, which was also Baisakhi, forbidding people from leaving the city without a pass and from organizing demonstrations or processions or assembling in groups of more than three. On Baisakhi Day, a large crowd of people, mostly from neighboring villages unaware of the prohibitory orders in the city, gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh, a popular place for public events to celebrate the Baisakhi festival. Local leaders had also called for a protest meeting at the venue. It is not clear how many in the 20,000 old people collected there were political protesters, but the majority were those who had collected for the festival. Meanwhile, the meeting had gone on peacefully, and two resolutions, one calling for the repeal of the Rowlatt Act and the other condemning the firing on April 10, had been passed. It was then the Brigadier General Dyer arrived on the scene with his men. The troops surrounded the gathering under orders from General Dyer and blocked the only exit point and opened fire on the unarmed crowd. No warning was issued, no instruction to disperse was given. An unarmed gathering of men, women, and children were fired up as they tried to flee. According to official British intelligence sources, 379 were identified dead and approximately 1,100 were wounded. The Indian National Congress, on the other hand estimated more than 1,500 were injured and approximately 1,000 were killed, but it is precisely known that 1,650 bullets were fired into the crowd. The incident was followed by uncivilized brutalities on the inhabitants of Amritsar. Martial law was proclaimed in the Punjab and public floggings and other humiliations were perpetrated. To take just one instance, Indians were forced to crawl on their bellies down the road on which the English missionary had been assaulted. The entire nation was stunned. Rabindranath Tagore renounced his neighbor knighthood in protest. Gandhi gave him the title of Kashte-Hind bestowed by the British for his work during the World War. Gandhi was overwhelmed by the atmosphere of total violence and withdrew the movement on April 18, 1919. Seen in an objective way, Dyer ensured the beginning of the end of the British Raj. What had happened in Amritsar made Gandhi declare that cooperation with the satanic regime was now impossible. He realized that the cause of Indian independence from British rule was morally righteous. The way to the non-cooperation movement was ready. According to the historian A.P.J. Taylor, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre was the decisive moment when Indians were alienated from the British rule. According to the historian A.P.J. Taylor, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre was the decisive moment when Indians were alienated from British rule. The events of 1919 were to shape Punjab's politics of resistance. Bhagat Singh was just 11 at the time of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. For Bhagat Singh's Bharat Naujawan Sabha, the massacre was to act as a symbol that would help overcome the apathy that came in the wake of the end of the non-cooperation movement. Udham Singh, who bore the name Ram Mohammad Singh Azad, later assassinated Michael O'Dwyer, the Lieutenant Governor who presided over the brutal British suppression of the 1990 protests in Punjab. Udham Singh was hanged in 1940 for his deed. His ashes were returned to India in 1974. The enormity of the measures taken by the government in the Punjab for quelling some local disturbances has been a rude shock revealed to our minds the helplessness of our position as British subjects in India. The very least that I can do for my country is to take all consequences upon myself in giving voice to the protest of the millions of my countrymen, surprised into a dumb anguish of terror. The time has come when badges of honor make our shame glaring in the incongruous context of humiliation. Rabindranath Tagore, in a letter to the Viceroy, no government deserves respect which holds cheap the liberty of its subjects. M.K. Gandhi in Young India and after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. The Hunter Committee of Inquiry. The massacre at Jallianwala Bagh shocked Indians and many British as well. The Secretary of State for India, Edwin Montagu, ordered that a committee of inquiry be formed to investigate the matter. So on October 14, 1919, the Government of India announced the formation of the Disorders Inquiry Committee, which came to be more widely and variously known as the Hunter Committee/Commission, after the name of its chairman, Lord William Hunter, former Solicitor General for Scotland and Senator of the College of Justice in Scotland. The purpose of the commission was to investigate the recent disturbances in Bombay, Delhi and Punjab, about their causes and the measures taken to cope with them. There were 3 Indians among the members, namely the Sir Chiman Lal Hari Lal Setalwar, Vice Chancellor of Bombay University and the Advocate of the Bombay High Court, Pandit Jagat Narayan, lawyer and member of the Legislative Council of the United Provinces, and Sardar Sahib Jada, Sultan Ahmad Khan, lawyer from Gwalior State. After a meeting in Delhi on October 29, the committee took as statements from witnesses called in from Delhi, Ahmedabad, Bombay and Lahore. In November, the committee reached Lahore and examined the principal witnesses to the events in Amritsar. Dyer was called before the committee. He was confident that what he had done was only his duty. Dyer stated that his intentions had been to strike terror throughout the Punjab and in doing so reduce the moral stature of the rebels. Dyer is reported to have explained his sense of honor by saying, "I think it quite possible that I could have dispersed the crowd without firing, but they would have come back again and laughed, and I would have made what I considered a fool of myself." He also stated that he did not make any effort to tend to He also stated that he did not make any sorry. He also stated that he did not make any effort to tend to the wounded after the shooting, as he did not consider it his job. Though Dyer's statement caused racial tensions among the members of the committee, the final report, released in March 1920, unanimously condemned Dyer's action. The report stated that the lack of notice to disperse from the Bagh in the evening was a terror. The length of firing showed a grave error. Dyer's motive of producing a sufficient moral effect was to be condemned. Dyer had overstepped the bounds of his authority. Dyer had overstepped the bounds of his authority. There had been no conspiracy to overthrow British rule in the Punjab. The minority report of the Indian members further added that the proclamations banning public meetings were insufficiently publicized. There were innocent people in the crowd, and there had not been any violence in the Bagh beforehand. Dyer should have either ordered his troops to help the wounded or instructed the civil authorities to do so. Dyer's action had been inhumane and un-British, and had greatly injured the image of British rule in India. The Hunter Committee did not impose any penal or disciplinary action because Dyer's actions were condoned by various superiors, later upheld by the Army Council. Also, before the Hunter Committee began its proceedings, the government had passed an Indemnity Act for the protection of its officers. The Whitewashing Bill, as the Indemnity Act was called, were severely criticized by Motilal Nehru and others. In England, it fell to the Secretary of State for War at the time, Winston Churchill, to review the report of the Commission. In the House of Commons, Churchill, no lover of Indians, condemned what had happened at Amritsar. He called it monstrous. A former Prime Minister of Britain, H.H. Asquith, called it one of the worst outrages in the whole of our country. The cabinet agreed with Churchill that Dyer was a dangerous man and could not be allowed to continue in his post. The decision that Dyer should be dismissed was conveyed to the Army Council in the end. Dyer was found guilty of a mistaken notion of duty and relied. In the end, Dyer was found guilty of a mistaken notion of duty and relieved of his command in March 1920. He was recalled to England. No legal action was taken against him. In the end, Dyer was found guilty of a mistaken notion of duty and relieved. In the end, Dyer was found guilty of a mistaken notion of duty and relieved of his command in March 1920. He was recalled to England. No legal action was taken against him. He drew half pay and received his army pension. Dyer was not, however, universally condemned in the House of Lords. Most of the peers favoured Dyer and the House passed a motion in his support, and the Morning Post is reported to have raised a sum of £26,000 for Dyer. A famous contributor to the funds was Rudyard Kipling. Strangely enough, the clergy of the Golden Temple, led by Arur Singh, honoured Dyer by declaring him a Sikh. The honouring of Dyer by the priests of Sri Darbar Sahib, Amritsar, was one of the reasons behind the intensification of the demand for reforming the management of Sikh shrines already being voiced by societies such as Khalsa Diwan Mazha and Central Mazha Khalsa Diwan. This resulted in the launch of what came to be known as the Gurdwara Reform Movement. Congress view. The Indian National Congress appointed its own non-official committee that included Motilal Nehru, C.R. Das, Abbas Tayyabji, M.R. Jayakar and Gandhi. The Congress put forward its own view. This view criticized Dyer's acts as inhumane and also said that there was no justification in the introduction of the martial law in Punjab. Dhanyavad. Thank you so much.